Big Ideas, Birkbeck's free public lecture series where academics bring their research out to local communities around London, sharing the exciting and innovative work that happens at Birkbeck and opening up the world of research and university. The series is organised by Birkbeck's Access and Engagement team, who support underrepresented groups of people to apply and succeed here at Birkbeck, University of London. This podcast will introduce you to the upcoming talks in the Big Ideas series. Our researchers will give you a preview of what's in store and hopefully entice you along to the event. If you like what you hear today and want to come along, you can find the details in the web link in the description of the podcast. We'd love to see you there. Today I'm joined by Kinga Kozminska, a lecturer at the Department of Languages, Cultures and Linguistics at Birkbeck. She'll be introducing us to her research ahead of her talk in May, entitled "What May Speaking English Mean in the Globalised World?" Hello, Kinga. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's great to, meet you, albeit virtually.
It's great to meet you too.
I'm really looking forward to your talk in May. And so I was just wondering if we could dive in, and maybe I could start with where all this came from. Was there original source or original inspiration or particular area of interest for you?
Sure. So I'm a lecturer in the Department of Languages, Cultures and Applied Linguistics, and I'm responsible for this new program on in English and linguistics. And the program really centers on global and contemporary Englishes. And the title and the subject matter that I'm going to be talking about is tightly connected to my research interest into that program and to the field that I work in, which is looking at various linguistic differences in English-sounding sort of performances as well.
So what does your research specifically focus on?
Okay, so I work in a field which is called sociolinguistics. So my research is really it's a very interdisciplinary area of language studies, perhaps the most interdisciplinary one. And I work with questions that have to do with sociolinguistics of globalization, and I'm very much interested in speakers who are positioned sort of peripherally to these dominant structures of the modern nation state. So I'm very much interested in stories and emerging linguistic practices of people in transnational space. So I work in context of migration, and I'm very much interested in understanding how people who have moved from one place to another develop an understanding of what counts as normal linguistically, what is allowed, what is desirable, and how this is sort of connected to particular histories and concrete situations in which people find themselves. So most of my work over the last decade has been on variously positioned Polish-speaking migrants in the UK. So I have been looking at people with various sort of linguistic resources, and I've been trying to understand these emerging linguistic practices in their everyday life.
So then, may I ask, what does that research look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, of course. So I work with qualitative and quantitative methods, which means that most of my work is ethnographic in nature. So I do participant observations, and I do various types of interviews with those people that I work with. And I sort of make audio and audiovisual recordings of people's interactions in the everyday life. So then I sort of collect these situated interactions, and once I have them, I then spend a lot of time analyzing the recordings. So I might be looking, for instance, for particular sort of linguistic expressions that I'm interested in, and I might be looking at the very minute detail of these social interactions, and then try to analyze that in relation to the wider dynamic of the project, and then trying to figure out how this analysis may sort of help us understand how these transnational cultures and projects are sort of woven together through interactional moves, That's what I spend my time on usually. And then I write about it. So that takes a huge chunk of my time too.
Sure, I can imagine. What's your favorite thing that you've learned during your research, or what is the thing that is most, or other people find most interesting when you tell them?
I think there is no one thing really. There are so many, and it's always like, I'm very much interested in stories that are a little bit lesser known, and sort of not available maybe to the wider public. So sort of trying to find these stories is the most exciting part of my work, and then learning from people and their communicative encounters in the everyday life is something that sort of triggers a number of questions really. I can't think of one thing really. And also like how, we have some dominant narratives in the world, I guess, and beginning with these sort of stories that are situated more peripherally, you can sort of see how they complexify some of these taken for granted assumptions about what people do, what they should do, how they live, and all of that. So it's just fascinating for me to discover these stories and then to see, okay, what is possible? What effects actually are created by different combinations of factors that affect people's lives, in these situations, and what logics people develop to deal with questions, in my case, with questions of sociolinguistic change. So obviously languages change and people develop quite very complex linguistic repertoires. So I'm sort of interested in understanding how that is embedded in the social fabric that they're in and in the social dynamics that they're in and relations that they develop and things like that.
For you, why does your work feel important to the world?
I think that bringing these situated stories is actually quite important to debunk many myths that surround populations that are not necessarily often sort of included in certain debates or that are a little bit, lesser known, as I said before. So maybe that is quite important to me also because I'm dealing often with questions of migration, and we do know that there is this increased politicization of migration. So it is quite helpful to sort of engage with these key questions, I think, today, rather than erase them, because obviously people have always migrated and they will always migrate. We know that due to climate change, war, and many other reasons, So it's sort of, for me, this is a way to I guess, contribute to spreading knowledge about some populations and their stories as well. And maybe also to develop new ways of thinking about, these transnational dynamics and how people are connected and how to think about what we're able to do together.
You say you find these stories, you listen to these audio and audiovisual stories. How do you find them? How do you have partnerships or certain groups or community groups that you work with to source these stories? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and it often is sort of related to particular themes that I work with. So, for example, we worked on a project that had to do with families and family interactions. So then obviously that topic dictated how you're going to be going about your recruitment methods and the stories that you find that have to do with, differently positioned families in Southeast England who meet sort of, who belong to that group that I'm interested in. So there are those sort of factors that have to do with the design of the project and particular sort of objectives of the project. But also, obviously, because I have been doing it for quite a long time now, then I have a wide network of contacts, and I also sort of dig deeper into these stories through by talking to people, by reading around the topic, by sort of trying to find particular organizations that deal with certain things that I'm interested in, and talking to various. There is a very thorough research before I start, really. So there are multiple, sociological factors that I have to take into account, and then various sort of, theme-oriented sort of selection criteria too.
turning our attention to the talk specifically in Camden, is there anything that you would like the people who are coming along, the participants, to ask themselves or think about before they turn up? Is there anything that might be, an interesting thought for them to have before they come along?
Maybe the very, question that is the title of the talk is actually the question that the audience could start with. So the question is very broad. It is, what may English mean in the globalized world? So obviously we can see that it sort of allows for various sort of thoughts to come at us, and various observations and various definition, I guess, and various sort of personal experiences with that very topic. And I think that could be a nice way to delve deeper into these debates that we're going to be engaged with, which will be sort of trying to put two things in dialogue. So really we will be trying to unpack what standards in language are, what standard language ideology is, and then sort of also contrast that with research on linguistic differences in the English speaking world. And we will be trying to figure out what factors we need to take into account in order to understand these, different situated sociolinguistic performances that we deal with in the everyday life, and how that sort of can help us also, understand one another more, and also to develop more inclusive ways of listening to one another, So that is maybe what I would sort of encourage others to think about, the personal sort of connection to the topic as well.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really looking forward to it and can't wait to hear the whole talk in full in May.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm also looking forward to the talk.